Baseball's a funny sport sometimes. Just when you think you have everything figured out, it turns upside down. That pretty much sums up the career so far of Cody Bellinger. As a rookie with the Dodgers, he broke out immediately, going for 39 home runs and 97 RBIs. 2 years later, he was the National League MVP. 47 home runs, 115 RBIs, 121 runs scored, and 15 steals just to boot. All it took was one unfortunate injury and a prolonged slump for him to fall pretty much out of fantasy relevance. Just 2 years after being the best hitter in baseball, he wound up with a negative WAR, that's wins above replacement, and an offensive rating of minus 21.5. So just when it looked like his career had gone off the rails, what happens? Of course, he bounces back to become one of baseball's best hitters again, this time with the Cubs. He didn't quite repeat the mammoth numbers from his MVP season, but he wound up with a 307 average, the best of his career, 20 steals, the most of his career, and he lowered his strikeout rate to the best of his career. Still don't know where Bellinger is going to play in 2024, but that's not the point. What I want to do is look at some players who could fit that same bill and be this year's Cody Bellinger, who is a veteran player that has once been near the mountaintop, one of the best hitters in baseball, and just has come on hard times lately, and it's not really even being looked at in fantasy drafts. If you can't wait for draft season, guess what? You don't have to. Join Underdog Fantasy and you can draft right now for MLB Best Ball for the 2024 season. They've got some new contests that just opened up. Check them out right now. If you sign up and use promo code Endgame, you get a 100% deposit match for your first $100 that you put into your account. Try Underdog Fantasy today. The first player I want to look at is someone who hasn't quite gotten to that peak like Bellinger has because he just hasn't been able to stay on the field very long. Byron Buxton looked like he was going to put together an MVP season a couple years ago, and surprise, surprise, injuries derailed it. When you think of a five-tool player, it's Buxton. Got a cannon for an arm, got massive power, great speed, still elite speed despite all the injuries, and he's now 30 years old. So you've got to wonder, this is a player who now is getting older, doesn't seem to be getting any healthier. He's never even had more than 462 at-bats in a season, ever. Just the last 3 years alone, he's averaging 79 games in a year. But it's not just the injuries, because we've seen for just brief glimpses of time what he is capable of. But just the last 2 years, it seems like maybe the talent has fallen off too. He's hit 224 and 207 the last 2 years. The Twins have been playing him at DH just to try to keep him healthy. He'll probably start the season that way again, but the plan apparently is to still keep him in center field if that's possible, and they don't seem to have a lot of contingency plans, and we know the Twins aren't spending up this offseason. So is Buxton going to be the solution at center field in the heart of that lineup? And for fantasy teams, could he actually put it together for something close to a full season? Will we actually see what Buxton is capable of? Look, I'm usually pretty risk averse when it comes to players with repeated multiple injuries. Buxton is just one guy I still find myself taking chances on. I'm not sure if I can do it this year, but again, if you look, everyone's out on him at this point. His early ADP in NFBC leagues as of January is 256. That means he's either a last round pick or not even getting picked. While I'm definitely willing to take a gamble on a talent like him, I'm also not a sucker. I'm not going to have a lot of faith in the fact that I think Buxton even gets over 120 games and produces enough counting stats to really be what you consider a breakout player. You know who else could fit the bill, though? How about another former MVP? Yankees fans are really hoping this will happen, although I'm guessing they don't have their hopes too high for Giancarlo Stanton. So you remember that rookie year for Bellinger I talked about earlier? Well, you know who was the actual MVP that season? It was Stanton, back with the Marlins, when he crushed 59 home runs, almost hit that 60 mark, led the league in homers and RBIs, and took home the trophy for most valuable player. And then he cashed in big time with the Yankees, and you know the deal since then. Was really good initially, but man, has not been able to stay on the field very long. And that's even with him playing DH most of the time. He's missed a total of 113 games over the last 2 seasons. He's got his own GM, Brian Cashman, who doesn't hesitate to speak his mind, basically assuming that he's going to get hurt this season. Well, he did reel that back a little bit lately and now says that Stan is in a good place. Great to hear. But there are reports that he's changed his off-season routine, his workout regimen, his diet, all sorts of things, trying to get leaner, trying to just actually be able to play a full season of baseball. He's done it before, but of course now this is a guy who's 34 years old. We definitely know what Stanton is capable of. He's been there before, but is it just too late for him? Even if he does play a full 162, are we going to get anything close to that level of production again? And remember, this is not a player who's going to give you stolen bases. It's easy to be skeptical here, but again, you have to look at his calling card. It's that mammoth power. I mean, basically, even at his age, he still has the best raw power on the planet of any baseball player except for maybe his teammate, Aaron Judge. I know last year was kind of brutal. He hit 191 for the season. This was across 371 at-bats. He still wound up with 24 home runs. And Statcast tells us that he's still among the top in exit velocity and had the second highest maximum exit velocity. I mean, there's still hardly anybody who can hit the ball as hard as Stanton. Is that enough to say that he's a full rebound candidate, a guy that's worth taking the plunge on draft day, or is this just going to be a headache? Well, first let's talk about another former All-Star who has barely been playing these days, Trevor Story, in the third year of a 6-year big deal with Boston, and they have gotten almost nothing out of it. He's played a total of 137 games over the last 2 years in Boston, and even when he's played, hasn't been that great. I don't know if we can even really judge what he's done as a Red Sox because we have such limited sample, and even when he's played, we know he hasn't been 100%, barely came back late last year, but the results weren't great. This is always a player who's had some swing and miss in his game, but the power made up for it, and he steals a ton of bases. Did he benefit a lot from Colorado? I don't know. We can't even say. Like I said, this Boston team itself hasn't been the same the last couple of years. We're going to have to see him healthy from the outset in spring training as a fixture in the middle of that lineup, and they really need some more consistency around him as well. Now, I do think they'll have that. I've been kind of talking up some of these fringe players in terms of fantasy for Boston. I think their outfield could be sneaky good, and Story should still be hitting in the middle of that lineup, surrounded by guys I like Tristan Casas and Masataka Yoshida. And despite all the injuries and being a little older than he was in his prime, Story still has his speed, 86th percentile sprint speed, and the exit velocity has still been solid as well. So it's like the tools are still there. Could Story finally have his renaissance in Boston in 2024? Well, let's look at one more player first. I'm going to talk about a guy who just signed on with the mega team, that's the Dodgers, and has kind of been forgotten about before then because Teoscar Hernandez, although he was never really a superstar player, did have a pretty monstrous year back in 2021. His last year with Toronto hit 32 home runs, 116 RBIs, and even chipped in 12 steals. And then he went to Seattle, and we've just seen things kind of plummet from there. He wasn't terrible, but at the same time, you're looking at where he was. This is a player who, I don't know if it was just the environment, maybe the park. I mean, to some extent, you can talk about park factors, but still, we saw his power take a nosedive. His batting average, never great to begin with, but last year in Seattle, there's times where he was really kind of unplayable for fantasy. He wound up with a 258 batting average and saw his strikeout rate go back over 31%. Also a little concerning for a power hitter. Over the last 2 seasons, we've seen his ground ball rate jump up over 40%. But what's intriguing about Teoscar Hernandez this year is that he's going from Seattle to the Dodgers. Obviously, a better lineup there, slightly better in terms of park factor, but also the fact that he's going to be surrounded by so many good hitters. He'll get some pitches to hit. He'll have plenty of runners on base in front of him, almost guaranteed. And one of the things that made Bellinger so intriguing was the fact that last year with the Cubs, not just the change of scenery like we see here with Hernandez, but also he was heading towards free agency. Well, Hernandez just got a 1-year deal, so he could cash in big time if he pulls through this year. Is Hernandez kind of that guy who goes under the radar, kind of a late, if he's there, I'll take him pick, but nobody expects him to bounce back and get to that all-star level? Could he be a stud for fantasy? I will say it's definitely worth taking a shot on him, but I don't feel a full bounce back because this is a player who had that breakout season, if you want to call it that, back when he was 28. A little older now, but also I'm seeing the plate discipline slip. And one key thing is he has been a lot worse against the slider. Back in 2021, when he had that huge year, he was plus 11 against sliders. And last year, he's down to minus 11 in terms of run value. He's having a hard time hitting the breaking stuff. So if there's one player I think could be this year's Cody Bellinger, it's got to be Giancarlo Stanton. It's not so much that I'm just buying into all this media talk about how he's in great shape, best shape of his life kind of deal. That's all good and well. But look, Stanton, we know that the one thing he brings to the plate, literally, is that mammoth power, and that hasn't gone anywhere. He hasn't shown any signs of actual decline in terms of his main skill. The batting average has been down, but still, I think he can get it to at least a respectable level if he is feeling good. And you know, a lot of times with guys, you look at those things, the strikeout rate, the chase rate, it's because of the nagging injuries, the toll it takes, the inconsistency in and out of the lineup, off and on the injured list. If he can stay out there consistently, I think we could see something not close to his MVP season, but I think 40 home runs is definitely in play, and I'm taking a shot on Stanton. These aren't the only star players who have seen their value fall recently. Some of these studs are now lower than ever on draft day in terms of their ADP. Are you going to buy the dip? Well, I talked about several of those players and give you my take. Check it out right here.